ngHouston. I really appreciate you joining us today. I realized this week I never say my name. I just assume that everybody knows who I am, and I always introduce my panelists and my guests, and I never introduce myself. My name is Bonnie. Welcome to ngHouston. If you have not watched the show before, I really appreciate having you here, and beginners and questions always welcome on ngHouston. Today we have a great show. I'm very excited about this, and I've actually been excited about this for a while. I was country when country wasn't cool, you guys, because we have an NX episode today. And I actually started preaching to clients the benefits of NX when NX first came out, and nobody really believed me. But now NX has been around for a while, and it's getting more and more popular. So we do have an older episode back in our archives, Introduction to NX from when NX first came out. We had Justin Schwarzenberger, my good friend, who came on and taught us all about NX, what it's for, what it does. So if you don't know anything about NX, it's a really great package from Nrwl. I don't know if it's a package. It's a mono repo. If you haven't heard the term mono repo, go back and find the first NX and watch it, because really Justin just stepped through everything from beginning to end. If you do know what NX is and you've actually been using NX, and especially if you're an architect who's been using NX a lot, then this is really a great episode for you, because Jason is basically the big boss of the NX team, I think, at this point, from what I hear from Nrwl. He's very important at Nrwl, and he's basically leading NX development these days. So he's here to tell us all of the latest and greatest of what he's been up to, what he's working on, what's coming in the pipeline. We're very excited about that. If you have NX questions, you can drop them in the YouTube chat. But first, before we jump into that, I want to introduce our panelists here. And both of these guys are very, very familiar with NX, so they will probably have some comments and questions for Jason as we go along. So first, I want to introduce Brian Love from Brewbug, one of my favorite people. Say hello, Brian.
How's it going?
It's great. I love having you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So Brian is a very smart guy. He's an architect, CTO over at Brewbug. He's also very important. And what you might not know about Brian, which I didn't know, like it'd take me a while to get to know him and hang out with him. Brian actually has a huge silly side, which you don't see because he's so professional and he's so smart. And like once you get to know him, he's kind of a goofball, which I love.
That's true. Very few people know that, Bonnie.
Well, don't worry. We don't have that many people watching ngHouston, so we won't tell anybody. Okay, and then we also have Philip Fulcher. Philip, welcome to ngHouston.
Hey, it's great to be here. So I am an engineer and a software architect. We work on a very big project with lots of different applications, lots of modules from teams all around the world. So we've been using NX since very close to the beginning of it. I've been really, really happy. I mean, Bonnie's exactly right that the NX toolkit solved and continues to solve so many problems that we had in terms of just being able to scale, global teams up to build very, very big things. So I'm excited to continuing to see where it goes.
Jason, you have to be sure and tell Victor that Philip said that, because this was Victor's brainchild, and it was funny when I first started. Like I knew Victor for a while before I really got to know Victor, but it was funny because there was a talk that I saw and he was talking about NX and how opinionated it is and how there's like a right and wrong according to Victor, right? But the thing is, it's like if you think he's wrong, you can actually go and discuss, and he will talk to you about why you think it's wrong and what you think would be better, and then he'll kind of talk through it with you, and then at the end of that conversation, you realize, oh, Victor's right, and he was right the whole time, and he'll have that conversation with you, but it always comes back around again, and so NX is basically just do what Victor said, and you'll be okay.
Yeah, happens to me every day.
Okay, so Jason, we're already using NX and we're already big fans of NX, but I know that you're continuing development on NX, and so I would really love to see what you've been up to and how you could possibly even make NX cooler than it already is, which I'm skeptical about. But do you have stuff? Can you show us? Or are you going to tell us? You want to share your screen? What's going on?
Yeah, I'll share my screen. I'll go through a couple of the main ideas. So for those that don't know, NX is a tool that's built on top of the English CLI that allows you to build like Google, basically. The three things that we like to say that we provide are we allow you to use modern tools. So the English CLI uses Karma and Protractor by default, but we found that sometimes Jest and Cypress are better alternatives. They're more
Yeah.
modern. They have like a lot of good benefits for especially developers.
Absolutely.
So that's something I added probably almost a year back now. So I'm glad to see people are using it. And yeah, moving on, building full stack applications is something that you can take advantage of in a monorepo or like just in general. But NX also provides you like great schematics to use Nest and Express if you want to spin up backend applications to go with your front end. That way you're able to not only kind of work on both sides of the stack together and on one environment, but you can also share code between the two, such as types and stuff like that. So it also like it feels just like the Angular CLI. So you can do like ngBuild, ngTest, and even though it's a backend, it feels very much like the Angular app you're used to building. And then at the end of the day, what we're hoping to achieve is that you'll be able to develop like Google. And how Google develops is that they have all of their code in this mono repository. So anything from docs to YouTube to Firebase, all lives in this monorepo. And there's many different ways that they can take advantage of this. They have their own tooling for this, and NX provides this for the general public to use. So those are the three main tenets of NX. And yeah, any questions about that?
Now, is NX just for Angular development or for Angular for the front end, or what are kind of your options for that, Jason?
Yeah, so NX started as just Angular, spun out of the Angular community. A lot of Victor is one of the former Angular core team members, but we've actually expanded. So in the back end, we've moved to Nest and Express, but in the front end, we've seen that a lot of times when you have a large organization, there are times when either one team wants to use another technology, or like maybe you just want to expand your hiring to other frameworks as well. So we have added React support in the recent months, I guess. So if you want to find out how that works, you can go to guide/using React, guide/React. So you can actually use React in your monorepo as well. And it works very much just like the Angular application. You can do ng-generate app, and excuse me. And yep, you'll get a lot of the same things, just Cypress out of the box. And instead of Angular, it'll have React in it. And you can share code just like you can between your Angular apps.
That's crazy. So you're using the Angular CLI to generate a React app? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive at first.
Is that even legal?
That's insane.
Blessing from the English CLI.
I'm telling Stephen Fluen.
Yeah, it is totally legal. So what happens under the hood in Angular CLI is that when you do ng-generate, there's these things called schematics. And they're very open to like whatever you want to generate. Could be anything from Angular to React, Nest, and things like that. So Angular CLI actually provides the extension point for other people to be able to build, say, React schematics. Yep. And the same way that you can extend schematics, you can also extend what ngBuild, ngTest, and other things do via the Builders API. So we've also done that. Instead of using the Angular build chain, we've still using Webpack, but allowing it to handle React and like any general web framework as well.
That's cool.
Do you have any plans to just continue expanding this and supporting things like Vue or other frameworks out of the box?
So we are thinking about expanding it. First, we'd like to kind of repackage things for version 8 so that we're more set up to do this. Right now, everything's kind of under one large package called like Nrwl schematics and Nrwl builders. But starting with version 8, we're going to be repackaging things into, let me pull up the issue here. There's going to be a Nrwl workspace, which will have all the core of NX, such as like creating a workspace, creating workspace schematics, stuff like that. But then everything's going to be broken out into Nrwl Angular, Nrwl React, Nrwl Web, and we're gonna migrate everyone like automatically as much as we can. So don't be too worried about all the breaking changes. As long as you use the yarn update, you should be fine. So yeah, after this, we can look into expanding into, say, Vue or other frameworks, and maybe have like, it should be easier for other people to create that as well if we don't happen to get to it fast enough. So it's definitely something we hope to do.
That's great, man. That's
Yeah,
really
that sounds awesome.
super powerful. Now, are you guys, your version, I may not know this, and I apologize if I get this wrong, but are you guys syncing up with the major release versions for Angular, or is it just happen to be that that we're looking at version 8 coming up?
Yeah, we are trying to stay in sync with Angular. Mostly stems from relying on the Angular CLI. So when Angular CLI moves, we tend to have to move. At least like it's been that way for the last year. So more or less it's in sync with the major versions of Angular. So when they release later this month, it's supposed to be, we'll follow short after.
Cool, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Not yet. Well,
Okay.
there were some questions over in the comments, but I'm handling those. So you just keep going. You're doing awesome, Jason.
All right. So
We're very excited about NX. So basically, we just love everything you're saying.
Yeah.
before I jump into the code, let me just show off the new doc site or whatever. This is our new doc site. You can find it at nx.dev. It's pretty simple to find. Hopefully we can link it in the description later. But
Is that that's a new logo? Is that Amanda's logo?
yeah, it's a new logo.
Good job, Amanda.
I think it looks great.
It is.
It does look great.
Yeah, and it even has like, yeah, it's just awesome. I just want to go through the docs and kind of give a walkthrough of what.
Hold on. I have a test for you. Does the search actually work in your docs? Can you actually type something in the search bar? I'm just going to be so impressed. I hate to put you on the spot. If it doesn't, that would be horrible of me. Ah, you have a function. You're searching for React. What are you doing, Jason? Don't you know this is an Angular show?
I mean, yes.
That's really, you've gone above and beyond, Jason.
Nice.
Yeah, so credit where credit's due. I didn't really work on the site all that much, but Ben Cabanas and
Who did it?
Ben, you can find him on Twitter.
We don't know Ben yet. I thought I knew all of Nrwl.
Hopefully this works. Yep, you can find him on Twitter at Ben Cabanas. So check him out. He does a lot of the work for the NX doc site and the Nrwl site as well.
I'm following Ben Cabanas. Good job, Ben Cabanas. You did a good job.
Yep, so some things we can use search to get to it. One thing I encourage people to do is go through the tutorial. So the tutorial is this kind of interactive way to learn about NX, and it'll guide you through the steps of building a full stack application and testing it with Cypress and Jest and stuff like that. So if you're new to NX, I would highly encourage you to go through the tutorial. If you're not looking at it from a technical standpoint and just want to vet it as like a technical solution, you can go through our fundamentals, guys. So these are not as technical. They'll teach you about kind of our core tenets, like what developing with Google actually means, what a monorepo is, and how NX achieves that. So definitely check these two sections out. And then after you're done with all that, I would dig through all of our guides and kind of dive deeper into what you don't know. Has anyone had a chance to go through the doc site and have any like feedback?
I actually think I was on the docs site a couple weeks ago because I was looking for something, and whatever it was, I found it pretty quickly. So I didn't spend much time there, which is good.
Yeah, same here. I was able to kind of figure out what I was looking for and move on, which was great. So,
yep.
And I love the fact that you guys have Cypress and Jest as options. because personally I really like Jest over doing Karma. It's just so much faster and better. And you guys have had that same experience, right, Philip?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We were just chiming in on that Twitter thread over the weekend of just completely cut our unit test runtime in half. We're able to actually write tests so much faster than we were before. The snapshot testing is really just like a breath of fresh air when it comes to testing things out. So we were really excited to see that. We haven't moved on to Cypress yet. I know that you and Jesse are always beating that drum. But it's not something that we've taken on yet.
Yep. Yeah, it's just great that NX has it out of the box. You get started and you generate out a new app or whatever, and it says, do you want to use Jest? Do you want to use Cypress? Which is fantastic.
Yeah. And I don't have any specific feedback on this documentation. It's great that you do have the documentation. For a while there, the NX documentation it was a little bare bones and it wasn't particularly organized very well. And so this is really, really great. And I love the step-by-step tutorial on getting started and being able to walk through everything that the library is capable of. So that's great.
Awesome. Good to hear it. Yeah, so that's about it for the doc site. I was thinking about going into setting up a new workspace and hopefully showing maybe React support. I don't know. What's interesting is Angular meetup, so I can do Angular as well.
I think we should do both. What if we do an Angular front end, a React front end, and a shared lib? Could we do that, or is that too much?
Can we share a lib between Angular and React?
Ooh, good question.
All right.
Y'all are getting crazy on this episode here, man.
I don't know. I don't like an ng module. Obviously, you can't import that into React, right? You could share validation code or like libraries and utilities, but I don't know if you could correct me if I'm wrong, Jason. Maybe you know better than I.
So let me share my terminal and we'll go and try it.
Let's do it.
I think it is possible. I might be
okay,
wrong, but we shall see.
Yeah.
All right. So
I just love that you guys are just going for it, like live on YouTube.
Hey, why not?
Yeah, why not?
This is
Let's hack
fun.
around a little bit.
Yeah.
Why not? So to create an NX workspace, I'm going to go into a temp directory. You can do npx create NX workspace.
You want to bump your font a little bit for us, Jason?
Sure.
I mean, I can see it because I've got yeah, there we go. Sweet. And you're doing latest. So this is this is pulling off of that version 8?
This is not version 8 yet. I'm going to hold off until showing that. It's not yet ready. We're hoping to launch a beta within the coming weeks. So when it is more ready, I would be more comfortable, but there's still some things we're working out.
You don't want to debug Angular code live on YouTube, Jason?
So create a next workspace. You give it a name. So it's going to be Houston.
Oh, yeah. I like that name.
So what npx does is it kind of goes and fetches the latest create NX workspace from npm, installs it globally, and then runs that. So this is very similar to installing create NX workspace globally and then running that, but just one less step. So we'll go ahead and run this. We'll get some questions that pop up. They're not really important for newer people. npm scope, you can always just click enter here. In version 8, we're going to take that off. But
I really love these. I love the prompts.
Yeah, that came out what, the CLI version 6, I think, included prompts.
It made me very happy.
Yeah, they're super easy to do too in schematics.
I was like, where were these when I was learning Angular?
Oh yeah, like learning the CLI and all that stuff. Yeah, no, it's nice. They've done a great job with it.
So we're going to go and open this up.
All right.
And I will have to change which screen I'm sharing again. All right, so we have our new project. I just want to walk through this a little bit. It's a little bit different than what you might see when you're starting out with kind of Angular CLI. So we still have like the angular.json. Right now this is empty because we don't yet have an application. But instead of having one source directory and one end-to-end directory, we have directories for apps and libs. So apps are kind of what you're used to. Those are things that we build and we ship to a web server somewhere to give to our actual users. Libs are just shareable pieces of code. So you can think about these as like things you might like normally publish to NPM. But for, I guess the ideal situation is that all of our shared code is going to live in libs. And the apps are going to take the pieces they need from libs and compose them into something that's usable for a person.
Jason, can you talk a little bit about the strategy around that? So let's say I'm building, for right now, I have one application in mind, but I know that I'm going to be building more applications in the future. So I've got NX, I've got a mono repo, but I've only got a single app in there and I've got libs. Where do I start developing my code? Do I want to start by putting code in libs and then just thinking, well, I might use this in another app one day, but I don't really know? Or should I, on the other side, should I kind of start with writing it, putting that code in the apps directory, and then maybe in the future, I'm like, oh, this code needs to be shared. Now I'm going to rip it out of apps and throw that into libs. Like, what's the strategy around that, and how would you recommend that to people that are getting started with NX and a mono repo?
Yeah, I think what we like to suggest is to keep most of your code in libs. So libs are shareable between other libs and other apps. So they're just more versatile, whereas apps you don't want to be depending on for the most part. So apps are very, very thin layer. Usually they'll just pull in a bunch of modules that you'll get from libs, and then you'll be able to kind of compose them there.
Okay. And what about routing? Also go libs, or do we want to keep routing application specific?
Yeah, so routing sometimes is application specific, but there might be times where two applications might want to share the same route and stuff like that. There is a middle ground that we can use here. So
Jason,
come back to it later.
James Henry wants you to zoom more.
More zoom.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, James Henry. I'm glad you're here.
Question. I'm new to WebStorm. How do you zoom?
Command plus.
I tried that.
Yeah, I don't think that works in WebStorm. I think you got to go into the preferences, and then you can set the font size, at least of the editor, but that may not zoom like the project tree and stuff.
Okay, let's bump it up to, why not, 36.
36?
That seems way too big for what this is. You know what? Since I'm new to this, let's open up.
He's bailing. He's going to VS Code.
I'm trying to go to WebStorm.
Yeah.
And, a lot of it is good, but this is what I'm more used to. So
I hear you.
And there,
I go back and forth. I do a lot of my presentations in VS Code just because it's free and everybody can kind of follow along. But I do like WebStorm for the power that it provides and local history and Git diffing and everything. It's just really great. Obviously, got to pay for that.
Yeah, so there's a middle ground that we can use. And
oh, you're not sharing out your screen. You wanna?
Right.
There you go.
Whoever works on Hangouts, you need to know that Linux is a thing and you should support it. All right. There it is, nice and big.
Let us know if you can see that, James.
One more?
I'm okay.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
As long as James Henry can see it, we're good.
Yeah, so there's a middle ground. The question was originally, like, should you put routing in apps or libs? And there's a middle ground that you can use. So what we like to say is that if you have an app, say, I'm just going to be super generic and bad at coming up with names, so app one, right? You have app one, and then you can have a directory under libs that's specific for App 1. So it's still a library, but it's under this directory that's sort of meant to be used with App 1.
Jason, I'm really sorry, but James still said it needs to be bigger, and now Connie and Zafar also said it needs to be bigger.
Okay.
Man, these people are demanding.
Very, very big.
I know, right?
I'm kidding.
Yeah, so you can like use the directory structure to your advantage and segment the libs how they're meant to be used. So yeah, any other questions before I go and try and accomplish this daunting task?
You know,
Oh, go ahead.
I'll just jump in with just a little bit of experience here for anyone who might be tempted to start putting a lot of code into an application because, I don't know, like a specification says, oh, this view will never, ever be in any other application. We don't need to create it as a lib. That your manager will feel that on the wind, and in 6 months ask you to move that view into another application as well. So you're saving yourself a lot of heartache to just
Ask
start
him how
with.
he knows that.
Just
I'm looking,
put it in
you know,
libs.
yeah, just put it in libs. It's like this much overhead. It's so much easier to just go ahead and start it as a lib, lazy load it into the application, and you and your manager will be a lot happier. The day your manager says, hey, could we put that view in this other application, or I want to spin up a new application with that view in it now, and you say, I can do that in like 5 minutes, boss. Everybody's going to be happier.
What's that overhead, Philip? So you mentioned the overhead of putting it in libs first. Can you kind of clarify what that is?
You know, a lot of it is just, you know, you might be tempted to just, okay, I will, you know, ng new my components right inside of my application, or maybe I'll think even a little bit further ahead than that, and I'll ng new an entirely new module to put inside the application itself. It's not that much more effort to, you know, you need to put in one more command, which is to just new up a library that you want to include, and then put your modules and components into that. From there, based on, you know, especially if it's just a view that you're going to route to, you'll just want to use the lazy load. I forget the exact option on there. This is why I use the Angular console all the time, or those console prompts, because I never remember the exact name of these flags. But there is a flag that says, I just want this to be lazy loadable. And so that'll take care of that. It'll put a router routing module in there as well. And then you can just go into the application, set up the route, and then lazy load that. And then the last part is just putting it into your TS config for that application so that the compiler knows to where to get it. So, you know, when I say overhead, it means you've got to run like maybe 2 more commands and add a line to your TS config. And I'll tell you that it's 100% worth it every time. Because it's definitely possible to pull a module out of an application and turn it into a library.
Sure.
But the time involved is a little bit more than what you would do where you're just starting with a library to begin with.
Right.
This is great because I'm listening to this whole and I've gotten used to Philip, right? Philip, you forget that you're an architect sometimes because he's like, yeah, first you're going to do this and then this and da, da, da. And for an architect, it sounds like it's not a big deal and we're all following this conversation, but the beginners watching are going, what the heck did he just say? I got whiplash. So if you don't have any idea what Philip just said, don't worry. Go back and watch Justin's NX episode, and in a couple of years, you'll sound just like Philip.
And you could also just follow Philip on Twitter too, right?
Philip, I was looking for you on Twitter.
And DM him and ask him all the questions you have.
Oh, he loves that. Yeah.
He's got a 10-week-old. He's got tons of time. I mean, he's not busy.
No problem. I'll have the baby in one hand and just the phone up in the other one. No, you know, as an architect, I tend to think of myself as just like a lead mistake maker. Like I have to make all of these mistakes first, so that then I can go back and tell everyone else, hey, don't do it that way. We took the wrong path 6 months ago. We got to do it this way.
Yeah, I've already done that wrong like 17 times. I know what's down that dead end road. That's how Victor knows. It's the same thing. Like, guys, we've already made these mistakes. Let me tell you the end. And 17 hours. Okay, but I do have, so there's one thing that I was thinking about while Philip was talking. and maybe this is a question for Jason, because what happens then if you have an NX repo and in the beginning everything's great, right? You're rocking and rolling and doing all this great stuff, but it's a good problem to have, right? Say your company grows, say you've got now millions of customers and lots of apps, and eventually it takes like 30 minutes for your repo to build when you're trying to do stuff. So is that, Jason, would you say, like, as this grows and you really, like, it takes longer and longer to build, is that just kind of a necessary evil? Is that something that, I mean, we have a lot of code, so it's fair. Is there any way to keep it clean? And I think maybe that's kind of a Bazel thing, is like, how can we streamline that build process when it does start to get this repo is massive?
Yeah, so one of the things about working in a monorepo is that there's just a lot of code, but not all that code is always relevant. So when I'm making a particular change, I might just be touching my specific application and like nothing else depends on it. So I really only want to test and build my application. Like this is very important for organizations that have multiple teams working across their organization, and you don't want to be breaking another team, or you don't want another team breaking you. So we have a command called affected. Let me go back to the doc so I can show this.
I guess at some point when your repo gets massive, complaining about the build time is like complaining about the Wi-Fi speed on an airplane. Like, you know, you're checking your mail while you're in the sky. It's like, it kind of seems silly. But at the same time, we do want it to be as fast as possible, so.
Yeah, so we have what's called affected. Basically, it analyzes two states of the repo, so two commits, and says, oh, I see you've touched projects A and C, and then like also say project D also depends on that. So let's build all A, C, and D, but B, which hasn't been touched or affected, you don't need to worry about. So how we're able to do that is kind of generating a dependency graph of your code. So all these boxes are applications, and all these ovals or ellipses are libraries. So you can see that if I run affected and say I touched admin feature permissions, client has no way of being affected or touched by this, right? A client is going to continue functioning just as it was before I touched admin feature permissions. So what does get affected is the admin application and the admin end-to-end tests. So if you're running yarn affected build, you're going to build admin. If you're running yarn affected test, you're going to test admin feature permissions and admin and so on. So this allows you to operate on your repo proportional to the amount of change that you've made. Now, if you make a huge change to your repo, like every project was touched, obviously every project has to be retested, but honestly, you're going to be kind of more grateful that that's happened, because it might catch something that if you're using a poly repo or like multiple repositories, it's harder to operate across all of those repos.
So this, you run affected, so you run the depth graph and then you run affected and you can actually do the build, and so it would be faster, it would speed. Has this always been here? I just didn't know, I didn't know about this.
This has always, pretty much always been there as far as I know. Maybe not in like the version 0 days, but yeah.
I love this.
This is one of the core things that allows a monorepo to work. A lot of times when people try a monorepo, they just kind of jam a lot of code into the same place, which we like to call code co-location, right? Like all the code is in the same location, but it becomes hard to scale unless you have the tools available. So a Bazel and NX allow kind of projects to be the operation units, and you can operate on each individual project, and then you're able to, once you know how those projects are related to each other, you can operate on the subset that you know needs to be operated on at any given time, which could be one project or it could be all of the projects.
Yeah,
Can we use this affected with like our continuous integration tools, so Jenkins and that kind of thing? Can we do that with like Travis?
Yeah, so this run depth graph is just to show it, but later on, you can see if you want to just print out stuff that you want to operate on, this prints out the affected apps, affected libs. But what's really interesting is when you just build the affected apps and lint, test, end-to-end, like any of you can actually like pass in any target you want to it. So like if you have some IHN that you like to run or server-side rendering that you like to do, you can pass in any target from the Angular.json. So like in CI, you definitely want to be doing this. What you probably want to do is point at master or wherever the PR kind of like is based on, and then the head would be like wherever the PR is, and it'll be able to figure out from there. That's all you need to give it, for it to say, hey, your PR touches this subset of projects. This also supports running things in parallel. So obviously, if you're running things on multiple projects, you want to do it in parallel so that you can do multiple things at once. And yeah, that also saves a lot of time in CI rather than just testing everything, but then also testing everything in serial.
James Allen wants to know if there's one package.json file and the dependency changes, is the whole app affected?
Ooh, that's a good question.
And also, Benjamin Cabanas is in the house, you guys. Ben, you missed it. We were talking about you earlier, and we tweeted at him, and he showed up. But more importantly, well, no, Ben is very important. Ben, you're very important. We really love the work you did. But what about the package.json that James Allen was asking about?
Yeah, so the package.json, I guess I'll preface by saying in a monorepo, there's only one version of dependencies, or like this is kind of the ideal situation. That way you update a dependency once and like all of your code gets updated. If you have multiple repos and like say they're all using Angular, you have to go repo by repo to update Angular, which is a huge time sink, right? You might spend weeks doing it. Hopefully not, because ng update's really easy, but to make it even easier is if everything were in one place. So no matter how many apps I have, the dependencies are going to stay the same. Now, does that mean that when I change my dependencies, everything becomes affected? Naively, it does. So most of the dependency structure is kind of analyzed through TypeScript. And whenever you import a TypeScript like project, that'll become a dependency. But for everything else, we have what's known as implicit dependencies. So implicit dependencies are the extra like 10% that we can't figure out from TypeScript. This kind of syntax basically means that this file, angular.json, affects all projects. And the same for package.json. And while that might not be kind of like always true, you may just say only one app uses Angular material and you update Angular material. Technically, not all of your apps are affected, but better safe than sorry. We're not able to kind of analyze that yet. So package.json just kind of implicitly affects everything.
Are you showing us where that's defined? Maybe we're still seeing the docs. I'm just curious. I know you're switching back and forth on screens, man. Because is that in the nx.json? Yeah, yes. Cool.
Yes, Hangouts team, please. Or I could just use a real operating system or whatever. But yeah, so this is nx.json. It lives in the root of your repository, and I was showing that there's only one package.json in your whole repository, and whenever you update any one of these, it updates the whole repo to use that. And while it might not be true, naively and better safe than sorry, we're going to say that package.json affects everything, as does like some other configuration files.
And does that star mean all tags? Can I tag my projects for maybe a particular implicit dependency, or what's that? What does that represent there?
So this star means all projects.
Okay.
So let me generate a project so we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, let's do it.
So we will use Angular. That's where we are. This is an ng app. I'm great with names. No directory. Let's use Jest. Let's use Cypress. And I'm not going to.
Might take a while to download Cypress.
Yeah, but once that's like as that's going, we can see that we have a list of projects in here.
Right.
So this is the application I just generated. This is the end-to-end test suite, right? And as we generate more projects, they end up in this project thing. So nx.json has a similar thing. It also has a projects object. And what this star means is that it's equivalent to, say, ng-app and ng-app end-to-end.
Yep. So
Right,
it's the
but
name
this
of the
goes
project.
on. Yeah.
Right. It's not the tags. Okay. That's what I was curious about. Cool.
Right. So it's all of your projects.
Yep.
So that's interesting. So the way this is set up sort of by default, so Angular.json has, the wildcard implicit dependency here. If you start to have projects that are like your Node backend or a React project, does that mean changes to the Angular.json are also going to cause rebuilds on an affected command for those as well?
Yes, currently it does. So in the Angular.json, this contains information about all your projects.
Okay.
And until this changes, it's harder to tell if like different things are affected. But like if you're adding a new project, it'll also say that every other project was affected. We can address this, but it's just not top of priority because there's a lot of other things going on, right?
Yeah. I mean, and in theory, those. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So even if you add like a new React application or library, it is putting that project into Angular.json, even though it kind of exists outside of Angular.
Right. So let's go ahead and commit this.
And is this affected? Is this based on your Git history?
Yeah.
Is that how it's determining this? Yeah.
Let me go through the steps. So if I generate another application now, and I say I want a React application, or rather like another team wants a React application, right? We're going to generate an application, no tags, of course I need a name. Okay, so you can't just always press enter, but for the most part, you can just press enter.
It's interesting that you're putting it in the JSON.
So I think this file is it's a misnomer the way it's named. Obviously, the Angular CLI is primarily for Angular, so kind of makes sense for their configuration file to be called angular.json. But as you can see, even though this app uses React, it's also placed into angular.json. That's just the way things are.
Sure.
I mean, it is just the way it's named.
Yep.
And it contains nothing in here has to do with Angular, right? Like this uses a different builder, so that's what ngBuild will do, and like all the code in here doesn't have to do with Angular, right? This is standard React. So anyways, I just made a change to my repo. So if I do like a git diff, there'll be a lot of files changed, git status, things have changed. Now I could be very bright and say like, oh, this obviously affects everything because Angular.json and nx.json were touched. But it doesn't make sense for any kind of person to be doing that. It's better if we can automate that. So if I run yarn affected depth graph, and then I point at, so I'm on the same branch right now, but let me point to like the previous commit, right? I'm gonna have to change my screen sharing. 1 second, where is my screen sharing? Sorry about this.
It's all good, man.
Yeah, you're good.
I want to show this, right?
You're doing a great job, Jason.
This is the affected depth graph. Basically, everything's highlighted in red, right? Because I changed my Angular.json and that affected everything. Even though I didn't actually touch my Angular application, better safe than sorry. Let's just say everything needs to be rerun. Right. So that's kind of the worst case scenario. Now, if we keep going, right? So I like these changes. Let me add another commit that says add React application, right? And now I have 2 applications. If I want to start working on my React application, I don't have to run like the whole repo at once. I'm just going to start the React portion of that, right? So because I have to switch back and forth, I'm just going to let you know. I see a React application. I'll show it in a bit. But what I'm going to do right now, it says, welcome to React app, right? At least if you know React, that's what this says. If I change this to ngHouston, right? Changes are refreshed. I see the update in my browser. But yeah, let me show that. Need to open that.
That's cool. That's really powerful, man. To be able to have that cross, because I mean, large organizations may just be doing Angular or a mix of Angular and AngularJS or something like that. But being able to bring this all together is just really, really powerful.
Yeah. So this is my React application. It says welcome to ngHouston. I don't know what we want to prove that it's a Angular application, but
you proved it.
Vendors is nice and small, right? So can't be Angular.
Oh.
Now I gotta find out how to edit a YouTube video. Thanks a lot.
Can't be Angular yet. When Ivy comes, we can see how this changes. Which it will change, at least for like this application right here. So I've only affected my application with these changes. So let me go back to.
Yeah, let's run that depth graph again.
So let's look at the changes that I've made. Cool. So ignore this. That's just an extension I have. This is the only file I've changed. I'm going to create a commit, and it's going to say, actually, I don't even need to create a commit. So let's run the depth graph again. We're also going to point at the head -1, right? And we're going to be able to see, or actually it's head because I haven't committed it. 1 second. Okay, so I need to share that screen. I feel like I'm driving many trucks. All right, so this shows that React is highlighted in red. I've only touched the React app, so I only need to rebuild the React app.
That's cool.
I almost forgot what the original question is, but I think I covered enough that answers that.
For sure.
Yeah, I love it, man.
You really did, and it's perfect because we're running out of time anyway. But this has actually been an amazing episode. I thought I knew all NX stuff because I've been using NX for a while, but I learned new things today. And I'm actually really excited about that whole affected thing, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but it kind of is. And I had no idea it was there. So that is pretty cool, and all of it's pretty cool. And I cannot really thank you enough for coming on, and really not only just for coming on ngHouston, but all the work that you've been doing on NX, because all of us benefit from it. And we really just have to give you a lot of love.
Yeah, very good job, man.
It's really a pleasure.
Yeah, this is
it's some of the most rewarding work I've ever done. So like I've only been developing period for maybe, let's say, 3 or 4 years. But like having open source work and everybody using your tool is very rewarding work. So I'm glad people love it. If you have any issues, if you have any feature requests, please comment on our GitHub, create new issues, and your voice will be heard. So it's really rewarding.
That's great. Okay, so the GitHub issues for NX are pretty active, and so when you get those GitHub issues, you guys are paying attention to those pretty quickly. How many open issues do you? I mean, they don't just stay out there and stay open. You guys are actually staying on top of those and trying to keep everybody happy. How's that working?
GitHub issues only ever go off, so.
But that's okay because so many people are using NX now.
Usually we try to keep it under 100. Right now we're at 150.
Yeah, but,
getting there.
but then you have people like Philip who actually take NX and push it to its limits and challenge it with all these edge cases that now you have to support. So I think it's a good problem to have. And you guys are doing such a great job. I'm continually impressed with the whole Nrwl team. Don't let it go to your head, but you guys are doing a great job. I really appreciate you coming. So I want you to come back anytime, Jason. You are always welcome on ngHouston. Really, anytime you have new things to show us, or just anytime you need some love, because you know when you work a lot remote, you don't get that love, and you might sit there working on NX day after day after day, and you got to come out sometimes and get the love that you've earned from the community.
Hey, Bonnie, so Bonnie, I have one last question. Do we have time for one more question or no?
For you, yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So the biggest question that I get when I talk about NX to enterprise customers and clients is what is the difference between this and Angular Workspaces, and why would I choose NX over Angular Workspaces? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And the core difference is the code co-location versus full monorepo tooling. So like it's easy to put all your code in one place, but all your tools in one place and everything like that, it gets a lot more difficult. So that's where Affected comes in. That's where like careful structuring of the directory structure and like bringing in other frameworks easily and things like that really come into play. Like co-locating your code is, I've already said it, like it just means that you have a lot of files in one source control, right? Like one commit hash. And while that's great for kind of like atomic commits and a lot of other things, you should still do it, right? The power really comes in when you're able to analyze your code, able to tell like project A depends on project B, and say, hey, I haven't touched those projects, so you don't need to worry about those right now. So those are the benefits that NX provides.
Yeah, definitely. And bringing in Nest or React, right? And being able to choose other options like Cypress or Jest, right? That's just out of the box with NX, and you're not going to get that with an Angular workspace. So.
And it's done all the configuration, because some of the things, especially when I was learning Angular, really I had a lot of pain on setting up configuration files. If I want to change something in the CLI, or if I want to change, SCSS to CSS, or when I was first learning Webpack. If you guys ever did Webpack without the CLI, then you understand the pain and all the configuration stuff. It's just so easy to spend a lot of time on that and go off kind of in the la-la land. And the nice thing with NX is all of that is done. So it gives you the container, and then you put your stuff inside the container, and a lot of that setup is done for you, which is beautiful. Yeah. And you just have to trust the wisdom of Victor Sapkin and do what he tells you.
Yeah, trust Victor.
And I'll say from experience, we adopted NX very early on, before Angular workspaces were available, because we just needed it right then. Once Angular workspaces came out, I took a look at it and I thought, oh, this might be great. We might be able to, just plug right into, the Angular core way of doing things instead of having to have NX on top of it. But then we looked more into it, and it's like, well, it doesn't do this and it doesn't do that. And a lot of that stuff we were using already, but a lot of it is just stuff that I saw in the future of, oh boy, we're going to need that. And some of that just comes from experience of having, I think we started the mono repo and my boss said, I think we're going to have like 2 applications. And within a couple months, it was 8 applications. And I'm staring at 15 applications in my mono repo right now. Brian and Bonnie both know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yep.
And so just that ability to, my assumption is always you're going to grow faster than you think you are. And so NX is just going to give you that boost that you need, that the Angular workspace is. While a really, really great tool, there's been a ton of work put into that, and NX just builds on top of that and really takes you to the next level.
And I really want to wrap this up with one thing that I remember when I first heard about NX. My first response, actually, when I heard what NX is and what it's for, what it does, what problem it solves, I was talking to Jeff Cross, and I was like, why should we use it? Like, why should we trust you, right? First of all, NX is brand new. If I start building on top of it, that's one more thing that I have to be responsible. How do I even know Nrwl is going to be around a year from now, right? of course, because I have to give Jeff a hard time, right? But his answer really is what I want to share with you guys, because it was an amazing answer and it couldn't be more perfect. And what he said was, NX is really not like another library for you to support. It's just configuration. Really, NX, the whole point of NX is it's a schematic, you guys.
It is.
All they did was make a schematic. It's a very highly opinionated schematic. It's very specific about how it will be done. But it's not like, now I have another piece that I have to support. That's not it. NX is just a very opinionated set of configurations. That's it. It's not a big like thing that, you know, and so once he said that, it's like NX isn't really another piece in the puzzle that you need to support. It's just a specific set of configurations that, you know, they thought all this through and had all these arguments. And I have really not found anything in my use of NX, and we have pushed NX and kind of challenged NX. I haven't found anything that NX couldn't handle. I have had to go back to Nrwl once or twice and ask for help once or twice, but the software will do it. And maybe I don't know how to do it, but the software will handle it. So you guys did a great thing, and I really applaud you for that. So before we wrap up, real quick, and Brian, I'm glad you're here because you can help me with this next part. I want to talk about upcoming episodes, what we have coming up on ngHouston. So next week, we actually have Nrwl Crosby from the AG Grid team. So AG Grid is like really powerful. And so if you guys are using AG Grid, or if you have any questions about AG Grid or anything, join us next week. The week after that, actually on May 29th, we have John Rista from Breebug. And B-Love, we haven't heard John Rista before. Can you tell us a little bit about John Rista and what he's talking about, this new NGRX auto entity thing that him and Jesse Sanders have been working on that I think is like going to be debuted on ngHouston, maybe, if I'm lucky. So can you tell us about John Rista?
Yeah, sure. John is he's a phenomenal engineer and a great colleague. So I think about a year ago, we were using NGRX. We use NGRX a lot for some of our projects. And, you know, Philip knows that, you know, NGRX is something that is very powerful and can provide a lot of, you know, functionality in terms of state management in large applications that have a lot of moving pieces and a lot of state. And so NGRX data, I think, came out last ngConf, and we really like NGRX data, but we thought, hey, maybe we could kind of tweak this and make it a little different. And so with that said, that's kind of what the NGRX auto entity library is. It's mostly an internal tool that we've used and we've developed. It just is kind of like NX just sits on top of CLI. This is the same, this kind of abstract layer, if you will, that sits on top of NGRX, and hopefully makes managing your NGRX code a little bit easier and more lightweight. And it's certainly something that we've enjoyed kind of using and building internally, and we've kind of shared it and open sourced it. So I'll let John kind of debut it and give you a lot more information about how it works and what it does and why you might want to use it. And it's not to say that it's better than NGRX data. It's just different. That's all.
We're going to have Ward Bell come on with John Rista, and they're going to duke it out right here on ngHouston. I'm just kidding. Okay, so that will be the 29th. And Brian, we would love to have, and you're always welcome on ngHouston if you want to come back. And same thing goes for you and cool. Jason and Philip. You guys are always welcome back. Thank you so much for coming on ngHouston. I really appreciate it. And we'll see y'all soon.
All right, see ya.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.